This film begins with the backdrop of the atmosphere of the city of Berlin, Germany, during the Second World War around 1830. At that time, Nazi soldiers were actively making arrests of Jews, who they then made prisoners of war. The story continues with the introduction of the main character, namely Bruno, an 8-year-old boy, who at that time had just returned from school. When they get home, their mother and older sister, Gretel, tell Bruno that the family will have a party tonight to celebrate his father's promotion to the post of commander of the Nazi army. Bruno's father was a well-respected figure in the city, so he finally got a promotion. However, it was at the same time that Bruno's father said that their family had to move from the city of Berlin to the city where his father would later be placed to work. Hearing the story, a visibly objected Bruno replied that according to him, his current house was the best. Bruno's father later explained that their move was an obligation, where his father's new position as army commander was a service to the country. Finally, with a heavy heart, Bruno agreed to the move. The day came when Bruno and his family moved into their new home, in a remote area. While in the house, Bruno's mother noticed that Bruno looked gloomy and sad, because in fact he still couldn't accept his move to his new house. While in his room, Bruno peeked outside through the window. From a distance, he then saw a building, which looked like a residential area. Out of curiosity, Bruno finally asked his mother for permission to go play with the children in the settlement. Bruno told his mother that he felt the people there looked strange because they were wearing black and white striped pajama-like clothes. In the middle of the conversation, an old man entered his house, carrying a wooden box filled with vegetables. After putting down the vegetable box and leaving, Bruno noticed that the pants the old man was wearing were similar to the clothes of the residents in the settlement he had seen before. Bruno then went into his father's study to ask who these people were. Bruno's father, who seemed to be avoiding Bruno's question, only answered with an explanation that Bruno didn't understand. Bruno's mother finally caught up and led Bruno into the kitchen to prevent their conversation from continuing any further. On a different day, Bruno accidentally fell off a swing while playing in the yard. Bruno, who was injured until he fell unconscious, was then helped and treated by an old man carrying a vegetable box, who then introduced himself as Pavel. Pavel told Bruno that he was actually a doctor before he was arrested and held prisoner in a concentration camp. Bruno finally finds out that Pavel is actually a Jew. The conversation ended with Bruno's mother coming into the kitchen and thanking Pavel. The next day, in the same situation when Bruno was playing on the swing in the yard, he saw a door that just opened. Curiosity made Bruno enter the door, then run through the open hallway, and finally out through a small window. Bruno kept running all the way, until he found the residential area he saw the other day. When he approached the fence of the settlement, Bruno did not realize that it was a concentration camp, which the Nazis used to house prisoners of the enemy of Germany. Starting from political prisoners, prisoners of war, until the Jews were detained and killed by Nazi soldiers in the camp, by putting them in a poison gas chamber. The bodies of the prisoners who died were also immediately burned in the same room. From where he was hiding, Bruno saw a boy his age sitting alone near the fence. Bruno slowly approached him, and then became acquainted with Shemuel. After that, Shemuel began to tell me that he used to be alone in that place, because he often fought with his friends. He also told me that they were building a new hut to live in. The innocent Bruno then asked Shemuel about the striped pajamas he was wearing, and whether the numbers on his clothes were part of a game. Shemuel replied that the clothes he was wearing were prisoner clothes given by the Nazis, because all their clothes had been taken. Shemuel says that he hates Nazi soldiers, in contrast to Bruno, who actually likes them, because his own father was a Nazi army commander. Increasingly curious, Bruno again asked what they were burning in the chimney. He felt that the smell from the chimney was very unpleasant. Unfortunately, Shemuel himself did not know, because everyone was not allowed to enter the place. Bruno kept asking about why Shemuel wasn't allowed out of the place, and whether the function of this electric fence was to keep out wild animals. From Shemuel's answer, Bruno finally knew that he was a Jew. This obviously took Bruno by surprise. In the end, Bruno said goodbye to Shemuel to go home, and promised they would meet again. When Bruno and his brother were studying with their teacher Mr. List about the nationalism and patriotism of the Nazis, where they believed that the Jewish nation is a big enemy who destroys the German state, and the Nazis, aiming to become rulers of the world. Bruno, who didn't understand, then asked if there wasn't a single person from the Jewish race who had a good heart. But the teacher replied, if Bruno can find that person, then it means Bruno is a great person. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Bruno's mother is now starting to get suspicious, with a strange smell of smoke coming from the concentration camp chimneys. She then asked her husband about it. But it seems that her own husband can't tell anyone, including his own family, because he has sworn to his country to keep it a secret. Bruno's mother felt that it seemed that the smell coming from the chimneys of the camp was the smell of the bodies of the Jewish prisoners. He also cried because he felt sad, imagining the treatment that seemed inhuman. Bruno's father then explained that his actions had become his duty to the state, as the commander of the Nazi army. And that task too, was to keep the German nation away from the Jews. The story continues the next day, when Bruno finds Shemuel inside his house, cleaning the glasses. Bruno tells Shemuel that they shouldn't be friends, because their nations are destined to be enemies of each other. Even so, Bruno still gave Shemuel a piece of bread, which he ate very voraciously. Not long after, a soldier under his father's came and scolded Shemuel, thinking he had stolen the cake. Shemuel defends himself by saying that the cake he ate was a gift from Bruno. Fearing that he would be caught making friends with the Jews, Bruno then lied that he didn't know Shemuel, and that the boy had indeed stolen the cake at his house. After the incident, Bruno felt very guilty, and ended up going to the concentration camp to apologize. However, he did not find Shemuel where the boy used to be alone. Bruno thought that maybe, now that their friendship was over. Inside his house, when Bruno's father gathers with his colleagues, a curious Bruno then peeks to see what they are watching. They turned out to be watching a movie, which showed the conditions in the concentration camp. Bruno saw a pleasant atmosphere in the concentration camp, which was filled with various activities, ranging from music concerts, sports, plantations, a variety of delicious food. Bruno concludes, if the conditions in the concentration camp where Shemuel lives are also as pleasant as they appear in the film. On the other hand, an argument broke out between Bruno's parents, because his mother felt that the house they lived in was not a suitable place for Bruno and his brother to spend their childhood. Especially with the fact that they live very close to the concentration camp, where Mrs. Bruno knows that the prisoners there are treated inhumanely. The incident, of course, would not be good if his two children found out. Bruno's father finally decided that Bruno and his mother and brother had to move back to another house. But just like before, Bruno also felt heavy-hearted, because apart from feeling comfortable in his house now, he is now friends with Shemuel. His father then replied that this was done for the good of Bruno and his brother, so that in the end, they had to move out of the house. Long story short, Bruno went to meet Shemuel in the concentration camp, whose face was badly injured at that time, due to the incident at his house last time. Bruno then apologizes to Shemuel, and also hopes that their friendship will continue to be maintained. And finally, they can play together again, with happy feelings. Bruno returns to Shemuel the next day, to inform him that he will soon be moving out of the house. And chances are, they won't see each other again, once and for all. Hearing this, Shemuel looks very sad, because it turns out that his father has disappeared from the camp, and has not been found until now. That's where Bruno intends to help Shemuel find his father, in order to atone for his mistakes, who had disappointed Shemuel. Finally, Bruno and Shemuel agree to enter the concentration camp tomorrow, to find Shemuel's father. The next day, Bruno secretly took a loaf of bread from the kitchen. When her mother asked, Bruni then lied, that he just wanted to play on the swing in front of the house. Then, Bruno ran towards the concentration camp, carrying a shovel. Arriving there, Shemuel was already waiting for him, and brought Bruno a prisoner's clothes, for him to wear so as not to be suspected by the soldiers. But unfortunately, the bread that Bruno was carrying had fallen, and he ended up using a shovel to dig a hole under the electric fence. When they entered the camp, the two of them went and looked for the whereabouts of Shemuel's father. But Bruno felt something strange, because the conditions in the camp were very different from what he saw in the film. which he watched the other day. When they entered the prisoner's room, suddenly the soldiers appeared and ordered them to go out to somewhere. Unfortunately, Bruno and Shemuel were trapped along with the prisoners in there. Meanwhile, Bruno's mother starts to feel worried because she doesn't find Bruno in every corner of the house. Until finally, he and Bruno's brother found a piece of bread, which fell right under the window, and it turned out that Bruno had left the house. Bruno's mother then told her husband about it, and in the end they all went to the concentration camp to find out where Bruno was. Arriving there, Bruno's father finds Bruno's clothes and digs a hole he made to enter the camp. With feelings of panic and worry, Bruno's father immediately ran into the camp, shouting Bruno's name. At the same time, Bruno, who was trapped with the prisoners, was afraid of his current situation. But Shemuel comforted him, saying that they would be fine. After that, the soldiers ordered that they all take off their clothes. Bruno and Shemuel, along with the prisoners, are then led into a room, which will later be filled with poison gas by Nazi soldiers. They apparently intended to kill the Jewish prisoners in the camp, but sadly, the soldiers did not know that their commander's son was among them. The film closes with a scene where Bruno's mother cries hysterically, and Bruno's father is stunned, knowing that Bruno is confirmed dead, along with the Jewish prisoners in the poison gas chamber. Thank you very much for watching the recap of the movie on this channel. Please help by subscribe and turning on the bell, so that I will be more excited to make the next content. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.